Unit 6, Absolutism versus Constitutionalism. Peter the Great. Peter the Tsar of Russia, was surely the most remarkable public figure of his day. He was only 10 years old when he ascended to the Russian throne in 1682. He grew into his job slowly. Even after he overthrew the regency of his sister Sophia in 1689, he spent his time in war games, building boats and making rockets for fireworks displays. Peter grew into a giant of a man, almost 7 feet tall in an era where scarcely anyone was taller than 5'10". His temper swung wildly between frat boy pranks to furious rage, and he had the constitution of an ox, so that he survived constant all-night vodka binges with minimal damage. In the 1690s, he scandalized the boyars by dressing as foreign craftsmen or a sailor, and he would hang out in the foreign suburbs of Moscow. He also angered the nobility by promoting men like Alexander Menshikov, a Moscow street salesman, to prince-like status. Peter broke with tradition most sharply when he traveled to Holland and England in 1697 and 98 in order to learn more about shipbuilding and to take in all he could of the ideas of the scientific revolution, to recruit foreign workers and scientists, and to party and see the sights. Make no mistake, Peter the Great intended to westernize Russia. On returning home, Peter greeted his chief boyars with scissors in hand and cut off their old Muscovite long beards. Next, he eagerly attended the interrogation and torture of hundreds of the Streltsy, the restless traditional Kremlin guards who frequently spoke out against his German innovations. The Tsar even got his foreign friends of Moscow to help decapitate those of the Streltsy found guilty of rebellion. To supply his army with guns, powder, and uniforms, the Tsar set up many new state factories, including many new ironworks. Peter always wanted Russians to borrow what was useful from the West, mainly technology, without becoming mindless imitators. His later conquests on the Baltic gave Russia direct access to the West. On the Gulf of Finland, there was a city designed to resemble Amsterdam, the city of St. Petersburg. This symbolic act was at least as meaningful as Philip II's Escorial or Louis XIV's palace at Versailles. Another break from the past was Peter's decision to imitate Western dynastic marriage practices by contracting foreign marriages from the Romanovs, a practice continued until 1917. Still, despite his Western innovations, he followed Ivan the Terrible's traditional formula of czarist power. His adherence to this formula was seen in his destruction of the Streltsy and his requirement that all noblemen must serve in the army, navy, or in the Russian bureaucracy. Toward the end of his reign, he created a table of ranks in which the boyars were ranked by their usefulness and their service to Russia. Still, there is probably no Russian czar that was more brutal to the Russian peasantry. The new factories to supply his army were staffed by a force of peasant labor. It is estimated that each peasant spent 160 days of labor per year directly for Peter. Naturally, the boyars disliked these extractions upon their serfs. Peter satiated them by passing a decree that no serf could move from his master's estate without written passport. Peter's style of rule stirred deep opposition within Russia. Many of the clergy hated his regulation and sometimes mockery of the Russian church and his tolerance of Catholicism and Protestantism within Russia. The boyar opposition has already been stated. Plus, they hated Peter's low-born companions, especially his Estonian peasant wife, Catherine. Among the downtrodden serfs, Peter was naturally not very popular. St. Petersburg was built on top of a marsh, and the labor spent by the by the peasants were crushing. Hundreds of thousands of peasants died during the construction of St. Petersburg. On a personal level, his own son, Alexei, was completely opposed to everything he stood for. The more Peter tried to train him, the more Alexei ducked his instructions. The more Peter bullied him, the more Alexei hated his father. By 1716, he was plainly allied with the reactionaries among the aristocracy and clergy, who planned to restore the old ways in the old capital of Moscow. When rumors got to Peter, Alexei had already fled to Vienna and later to Naples. Peter hunted him down and had him brought home for interrogation and torture. Alexei received 40 strokes of the knout and died of his wounds before he could be publicly executed. Still, his foreign policy achievements, even though nowhere near as successful as he had hoped, had massive impact on the later history of Europe. Peter initially went south to establish access to the Black Sea, namely the city of Azov, where the Don empties into the Sea of Azov. At the outset, he was successful against the Turks. These gains, however, were overturned in 1711 due to Peter's war with Charles XII.